Hi, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I thank you for participating in the National Transit Database Reporting for Reduced Reporters for Report Year 2017 webinar. This is being hosted by the National Transit Institute. We develop, promote, and deliver training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. We are pleased to have Courtney Springer and Melissa Conte as our presenters. Courtney Springer joined the NTD team in 2015 after graduating from the University of Virginia. She currently works as a validation analyst for state DOTs and American Indian tribes under the Rural Reporting Module of the National Transit Database. Melissa Conte joined the NTD team in 2015. She holds a BA in Political Science and currently serves as a validation analyst for Urban and Rural Reporting Modules of the National Transit Database. Today's webinar consists of Courtney and Melissa presenting their material, followed by a question and answer session at the end. You can participate in the discussion by using the chat pod that is located in the lower left bottom hand of your screen. I will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, so I will save your questions for the end if Courtney or Melissa, whoever's not speaking, can't answer them at the time they're being asked. If you haven't already printed out a copy of the presentation that was emailed to you, you can click on the handout document in the upper left-hand corner of your screen where it says Handouts, or you can copy and paste the link in the notes box on the left-hand side of your screen in the middle. If all else fails, you can email Andrea Lambert here at NTI. She's at andrealam@nti.rutgers.edu, and she will be happy to assist you. I will now turn the presentation over to Courtney and Melissa.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Transit Database webinar for Reduced Reporters. Thank you very much for joining us today. Here's the contact information for the National Transit Database. If at any point you require technical assistance while completing your report or accessing our published data products, please feel free to call or email our help desk line between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. My name is Courtney Springer, and Melissa Conte will also be presenting with me today. Our contact information is listed here. Here's the agenda for this afternoon. We will review the basic policies of NTD reporting, including a reporting overview, as well as touching on some policy clarifications for this year. We will discuss how to get started in the NTD 2.0 system, how to kick off and complete the annual report, how to submit the report through the system, as well as reviewing the validation and revision processes. So who reports to the NTD? These are recipients of FTA 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Program Funds or FTA 5311 Rural Area Formula Program Funds. They are public transportation providers, including direct transit providers, state departments of transportation and their subrecipients, as well as metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs. Agencies are welcome to report their public transit data to the NTD on a voluntary basis, even if they do not currently receive these funds. The data from these reports contributes to apportionments for their urbanized areas or UZAs. Within the urban module, reduced reporters are transit agencies who operate fewer than 30 vehicles in their peak maximum service. They also do not operate on any fixed guideway, such as rail or fixed catenary systems. For those who report as a reduced reporter, these agencies do not report data related to passenger miles in their service, and they also do not report monthly service statistics or monthly safety data. Agencies have 4 months after their fiscal year ends to complete their NTD reports. For example, if your fiscal year ends on June 30th, the deadline for submission is October 30th, and the report must be closed out or finalized by April 1st of the following year. We have 3 primary groups of fiscal year reporting deadlines listed here. Report all public transportation services, whether they are operated by your agency directly or contracted out as purchased transportation. Public transit must be regular, continuing, shared ride, and open to the public or a segment of the public, such as seniors or persons with disabilities. Report all assets, expenditures, and service data associated with these services. In your financial data, you should report the total annual cost of your service, regardless of whether it was federally or locally funded, and you should only report services for which your agency is responsible for covering the full cost. Report data that is specific to each mode and type of service you operate, such as bus, demand response, van pool, and so on. Be sure to collect and report service and financial data by each separate mode. Additionally, ensure you report actual data rather than data that is based on calculations or estimates. Report all direct as well as indirect expenses related to the service, also regardless of funding source. Here's the general flow of the NTD reporting process. All agencies begin with reporting training and familiarizing themselves with the NTD policy manual. They then compile and collect their data once their fiscal year ends. They enter it into the NTD system and submit their first report, and their assigned analyst will review the data and send it back with revisions or requested clarifications. Once the report is finalized, it is sent to FTA for approval. The data is used in the apportionment formula funding the following year, and the data is eventually published on the NTD website for the general public use. Agencies that would like to request an ID to begin reporting to the NTD must do so by the end of the fiscal year in which they wish to report. For example, if an agency's fiscal year ends on September 30th, they would need to request the ID by September 30th, 2018 to report to the NTD during report year 2018. As of next report year, updates to the Uniform System of Accounts will take effect. Agencies will be able to create customizable B30s based on the modes they report. Fare revenues will be separated into passenger-paid versus organization-paid fares. Donations and insurance recoveries will be reported to the Other Directly Generated Funds field, and reduced reporters will be required to complete an independent auditor statement for financial data. This review ensures that the reporter is equipped to report to the NTD according to FTA's requirements. The 2018 USOA is posted on the NTD homepage if you would like further information on these changes. So this is the NTD homepage. For those who aren't familiar, it's transit.dot.gov/NTD. There are two links on this page that will allow you to access the reporting system. Once you select either of these links, you'll be taken to a privacy disclaimer. Log in by entering your username, which is your email address in all lowercase letters, and enter your password. If you have forgotten your password or are logging in for the first time after having your account created, select Forgot Your Password. Enter your email address and hit Send Email to receive an automated email containing a link to reset your password. The link lasts for 15 minutes, so if you do not reset your password within this window, repeat the process. If you do not receive the email after completing this process, check your spam or junk email folders, or check whether your agency has any firewalls in place. Once you log in, you will land on the news feed. You will see updates and notifications from the NTD team here. While the system does include a means to enter comments or provide kudos to your analyst, please do not use this platform as a means to contact your analyst with reporting questions. Please always email them or give them a call. Access your annual report, agency profile, and your system users through the Records tab. The agency profile section is a frequently accessed part of the NTD system. This houses data that typically does not change from year to year, such as your basic information, the modes you operate, the users who need access to the report, and your agency's historical reports. Access the profile by hitting the Records tab at the top of the page, then My NTD Reporter Profiles. You will then select your agency's profile link, which will take you to the Profile Summary page. This page contains your analyst's name, phone number, and email address, as well as your agency's basic information. At the top of the profile section, the e-file library contains historical requests such as extension requests or agency fiscal year updates. The form library contains your agency's reports from previous years. If you need to access the 2016 NTD report for reference while completing the 2017 report, you can do this through the form library. Related Actions allows you to edit your agency's profile information, like your basic information, agency modes, or users. To edit your modes, select Related Actions, and then select the View and Manage Reporter Modes link or open the B30 form. If you'd like to add a new mode to your agency profile, select Add Mode at the bottom of this screen. You will not need to add the same mode year over year, as this data will be retained in the system. Select the mode from a drop-down menu, such as Bus, Demand Response, or Van Pool. Select whether the service is directly operated by your agency or contracted out as purchased transportation. Enter the commitment date, which is when your agency first committed capital funds toward the mode, and enter the start date, which is the first day of revenue service. Do not enter an end date if the service is still in operation. Only enter an end date if the service has been terminated. Please note that agencies cannot delete modes from the profile once they have been added. You may edit modes directly in this form by selecting the field you wish to update. You may add an end date if the service has ceased operations, or update the commitment or start dates as needed. To add a new user to your agency's NTD profile, select the Actions tab, then Create New User. Please note that only users with designated user management privileges may add, update, or deactivate agency users. Enter the person's basic information. Complete all applicable fields, including all required fields, which are denoted with an asterisk. Next, enter the person's contact information, including a phone number which NTD analysts may use to contact the user. On the next screen, you will select their user role from a list of available roles for your agency. Some roles may only be fulfilled by one person, such as CEO or NTD contact, but other roles can be assigned to multiple users, such as editor or viewer. This list will populate based on which roles are assigned to your agency's current users. The typical options for completing the annual report are CEO, NTD contact, editor, viewer, and CEO delegate if applicable. The CEO delegate role is optional for all agencies and requires FTA approval. CEOs have the highest level of access and permissions in the system, including the ability to create reporter requests like waiver or extension requests. CEOs may also submit the annual report package, as well as view and edit report forms and issues. NTD contacts have the same permissions as CEOs aside from creating reporter requests and submitting the first draft of the report. Editors may only revise and save forms, while viewers may only view the forms. You may disregard the safety roles, such as safety contact or safety editor, as urban reduced reporters do not report safety data through the monthly safety module. To view all of your agency's NTD users at once, navigate to the Related Actions tab of the Profile section and open the B30 View and Manage Reporter Users form. All of your agency's users will appear in this list. To update a user's system roles, select their last name, which appears as a blue link. Selecting this link will redirect you to their individual user profile, where you may update their role. If you would like more detailed guidance on user management, please refer to the FTA FACES User Guide, which is posted on the NTD homepage. The first step in completing the annual report is completing the report year kickoff. This process officially launches the current report year. After your fiscal year ends, your agency's CEO and NTD contact will receive a task in the system to complete the kickoff. This process will generate the report package for the year after you confirm your agency's information. First, the CEO or NTD contact will select the Tasks tab. You will complete the 2018 report year kickoff in order to generate the 2017 report package forms. You will first need to accept the task, and then you may hit Proceed. The first step in this process is confirming or editing your agency's users for the year. You can add users or edit existing contact information as needed here. The next step is confirming or editing your agency's modes for the year. You can add new modes if you started a new service, or end modes if a service has ceased operations in the past year. The next step is managing your 2018 Transit Asset Management Group Plan sponsor. If you will report to the asset inventory under a group plan, select your sponsor here. This is new for the Report Year 2017. If you would like more information on transit asset management reporting, please refer to the guidance posted on FTA's website. Next, you'll confirm your reporter type for 2017. If you were a small systems reporter last year, ensure that No is selected under Change Type, as your reporter type will not be changing. Select the same answer for your 2018 reporter type, and then select Submit to complete the report year kickoff. This will generate your 2017 report package forms. The system typically takes a couple of minutes to complete this function, so please be sure to check your forms after allowing a little time to pass. To access your 2017 report package, select Records at the top of the page, then NTD Report Packages. You will then select the 2017 report package link. Once the report package summary page opens, select Annual Forms in the top right-hand corner. This will open the list of report package forms. You can select any form link in order to open it. This is the list of forms that you will see in your report package, which we will now review one by one. Please note that the Transit Asset Management Facilities Inventory A15, Service Vehicle Inventory A35, and Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Targets A90 are all optional this year. We will talk a little more about these forms later in the presentation. The first form in each report package is the B10 Identification Form. The first step on this form is to select your agency's organization type from the drop-down menu. Examples of available organization types include city, county, and local government, or independent public agency or authority of transit service. Once you have selected your agency's organization type, then you will report your demographic information. This includes service area square miles and service area population. These data points for service area should represent your agency's true service area for transit and not the data for your particular urbanized area. To complete your demographic information, you will report data related to your urbanized areas, or UZAs. Your primary UZA will be pre-populated in the form, and then you will select any secondary urbanized areas as applicable by selecting them from the available secondary UZA drop-down menu. You will then click the Add UZAs button. Lastly, if your agency has any modes that will be captured in another NTD report, you will report them here. If this does not apply to your agency, please leave this section blank. You should consult your analyst before adding any new modes filing separate on this form. Next, we will cover the B30 Contractual Relationship Form. This form captures information about contractual relationships. These are relationships where transit service is provided to an agency or governmental unit from a public or private transportation provider based on a written contract. The buyer of service will be the transit agency that pays another entity to perform service. Please note, if the buyer of service only pays a portion of the cost to operate service, it should not be reported as a contract. The seller will be the entity that provides service on behalf of the agency. The seller may be a public or private entity. The NTD has specific criteria for service that may be reported as a contract. The criteria are as follows. A written agreement exists that, number one, obligates the seller to provide the operations for a specific monetary consideration. Number two, specifies a contractual relationship for a certain time period and service. Number three, obligates the seller to provide the buyer with operating statistics required by the annual NTD report. And lastly, the authorized representative of both the buyer and seller sign the written agreement. Buyers must pay the full cost of service in order to report the service as a contract to the NTD. Also, the service must be branded under the transit agency purchasing the service. In order to add a B30 form to your report package, you will click on the Add Contractual Relationship button at the top of your report package summary dashboard. All B30s from previous report years will generate during your report year kickoff as part of your report package. For report year 2018, there will be two types of B30 forms, one for van pool modes and then one for all non-van pool modes. Once you've added the B30 form to your report package, the first step is to select whether the contractual relationship is with another agency who reports to the NTD or is a private company. Once you've done so, you will then click Continue. If your B30 is with another NTD reporter, you must select the contracted agency from a list generated by the NTD database. You can also search the provider in the search bar. Next, you select your contractual position. This will be whether your agency is the buyer of service or the operator or seller of service. Once you have indicated your position, you will then report whether the contract was negotiated or competitively bid. This should refer to when the contract was awarded, even if the option years have been exercised. Now you will select the primary feature of the contract. How does the buyer compensate the seller? There are two options. The buyer pays the seller a negotiated fixed rate per unit of service, or the buyer reimburses the seller's net operating expenses based on an approved budget. You will select either one of these options from the drop-down menu. Then you will indicate whether the service will be reported in your NTD report or in another NTD report. If you are reporting the service in your own NTD report, then select the option of In this report. If another NTD reporting agency will be capturing the service provided in the contract, then select In another report. The last aspect of the summary is to select the public assets provided to the seller by the buyer, if applicable. This may be vehicles, maintenance facilities, or other public assets. If you select Other, you will be required to provide a description of the public assets provided. The next section of the B30 form is where you will add each mode provided as part of the contract. You may only add active modes from your P20 form or modes listed as filing separately on your B10 form. You will click the Add New Mode and Type of Service button at the bottom left of the form to add modes. There are several parts of the financial and operations statistics section. First, you will indicate how many months the seller provided service during the report year. Then you will report the number of vehicles operated in maximum service, or VOMs. This should represent the highest number of vehicles operating at any given point during the year, excluding special events or atypical service days. Next, you will report the amount of fare revenues generated by the service. You will report the amount regardless of whether the buyer or seller retains the fares. Please note for report year 2018, agencies will indicate whether the seller retains the fares or if the buyer retains the fares for the service themselves. Once you have entered the fare revenues, then indicate the contract operating expenses net of fare revenues and capital leasing. This should be the amount that the buyer pays the seller net of the fare revenues and any capital leasing costs. Generally, the fare revenues are netted out by the sellers to begin with. Next, you will indicate the amount of capital leasing expenses for the contract. Capital leasing costs are expenses that the seller charges the buyer for use of its capital assets, such as vehicles or maintenance facilities. If the buyer provides all of the assets, this does not apply. If you are the buyer of service, you will record any costs your agency incurs for overseeing the contract under the other operating expenses incurred by the buyer field. This should include general administration costs to oversee the contract and any other applicable expenses. Lastly, you will report any leases and rentals to the other reconciling items incurred by the buyer field. This will be for expenses such as vehicle rentals, if applicable. Here we have a table with key terms and definitions from the B30 form. Please feel free to use this slide as a resource when completing your B30. Next, we have an example for the B30 form. First, you will identify the revenues received by the contractor. In this case, we have $1 million. Now we will identify the capital leasing costs, if there are any. In this example, capital leasing costs are $200,000. Next, we will identify the purchase transportation fare revenues generated by the service. This amount is $150,000. You should include any costs paid by the riders as a fare. Now we will use these figures to determine the contract subsidy operating expenses net of fare revenues and capital leasing costs. This will be the $1 million minus the capital leasing at $200,000 and then minus the fare revenues at $150,000. The remaining total will be $650,000, which is our contract subsidy operating expenses. This is the process you can use to determine the figures that should be reported on your B30 form. The next form we will review is the A10 Stations and Maintenance Facilities form. On this form, you will begin by reporting on your agency's passenger stations. You will report the number of ADA accessible and non-accessible stations, as well as the number of elevators and escalators. Passenger stations must be significant structures in separate rights-of-way in order to be reportable. Please note that bus stops or bus shelters do not count as passenger stations. With the introduction of the Expanded Asset Inventory module in Report Year 2017, the number of multimodal stations is no longer captured on the A10 form. Next, you will report a count of your agency's maintenance facilities used to support revenue service. This will include any owned or leased maintenance facilities. You will report the facilities by the facility ownership type, and capacity. If your agency uses one maintenance facility for multiple modes, you will need to prorate the facility based on the amount of vehicles it services. For example, if an agency operates a demand response mode and a bus mode that use the same facility, this facility would need to be prorated between each A10 form for each mode. If the vehicle owns 20 vehicles total, 15 of which are used for demand response, and the other 5 are used for bus, the demand response A10 form would reflect 0.75 of the facility, and the bus A10 form would reflect 0.25 of the facility. If this is determined by taking the total number of vehicles for each mode and dividing by the total vehicles for all modes. Now we will review the A30 Revenue Vehicle Inventory form. Each year, you should review the A30 form and update with any new vehicles or retire any vehicles that are no longer in service. The A30 form will pre-populate all vehicle fleets from the previous report year. If you need to add a new fleet, you will select the Add New Fleet button. First, you will report the basic information about the fleet. If there are multiple vehicles in a fleet, these vehicles should be identical across all specifications. You will then select vehicle type from the drop-down menu of options. Then you will report the number of total vehicles and active vehicles in each fleet. Active vehicles should include all vehicles that are available to provide revenue service, including spares. Next, you will select ownership type. This includes options such as owned or leased, and whether it is owned or leased by a public agency or private entity. You will then select the funding type. This should represent the largest funding source for the vehicle fleet. There are several options for funding type, including FTA grant programs, other federal funds, and non-federal funds. Once you have entered the basic information, you will now report the vehicle information. This includes the fleet's model, length, seating and standing capacity, fuel type, manufacturer, and year of manufacture. Some vehicles may have multiple manufacturers. Agencies must report the final manufacturer and model. For example, for a cutaway vehicle, you should report the cutaway body manufacturer and model, since that is the final manufacturer of the vehicle. You should not report the manufacturer and model of the vehicle chassis. If you have any questions about how to report these data points for your fleets, please contact your analyst for guidance. As a note, beginning in Report Year 2018, if your agency reports a year of rebuild for a vehicle fleet, you will also now be required to indicate the type of rebuild that was performed. Lastly, you will report mileage information. This includes miles this year, which should reflect all mileage incurred by the fleet during the fiscal year, and then the average lifetime miles, which is the average total mileage per active vehicle in the fleet. Average lifetime miles can be calculated for the current report year in two ways. If the prior year's average lifetime miles were accurate, you can divide the miles this year by the number of active vehicles and add it to the previous year's average lifetime miles. Or you can simply take the average of all odometer readings for all active vehicles in a fleet if the odometers have worked for the entire lives of the vehicles. If you need to edit an existing fleet, you will first click on the link of the fleet's RVI ID or Revenue Vehicle Inventory ID. Once you click on the desired fleet, you will then be able to update any fields as necessary. A new feature for the 2017 report year is the ability to add an existing fleet onto your A30 form. For agencies that share fleets between modes, you will now be able to copy fleets from one A30 to another by selecting the Add Existing Fleet option. The system will populate all fleets that may be shared between modes. If the vehicle type of a vehicle fleet is uncommon for the current mode, for example, if your agency uses an over-the-road bus for demand response, the system will not populate this fleet as an option to be shared between the A30 forms. For these unique fleets with unusual vehicle types shared between modes, you will follow the protocol as you have in previous report years and enter these fleets manually on each A30 form. If a fleet is no longer in service and needs to be retired, you should not delete the fleet from the A30 form, but rather you should report active vehicles as 0 and then select yes for is this fleet retired. If the fleet is out for repairs and will be coming back into service, you will update active vehicles to 0 and then select no to the is this fleet retired question at the bottom of the form. Fleets should only be deleted from the form if they were erroneously added to the report. You can delete a fleet by clicking on the red X next to the fleet entry. Lastly, we will review a few common validation issues on the A30 form. The first is related to shared fleets. The most common issue is that the shared fleets do not match across A30 forms. If a fleet is shared between modes, all specifications for the fleet must be identical on each A30 form where the fleet appears. The new Add Existing Fleet functionality should help with this issue. The second common validation issue is related to new vehicles on the A30 form with no capital funds reported. If you are reporting new vehicle fleets on the A30, you should report the corresponding capital funds in your financial data sections on the RR20 form. Lastly, each fleet must have complete data. All fields of the A30 should be completed prior to submission. Now we will cover the RR20 or Reduced Reporting Form. This form will include financial, service, and safety data. There are several sections on the RR20 form, including fair revenues and directly generated funds, revenues accrued through a PT agreement, non-federal funds, federal government funds, service data, and safety data. The first section is where you will report financial data. First, you will report the total annual expenses by mode and type of service. This should include all funds expended towards your public transit service. You will separate funds by funds expended on operations and funds expended on capital. Next, you will report fair revenues by mode and type of service. Fair revenues should include all income received directly from passengers, including cash or prepaid tickets, reduced or subsidized fares, donations made on board the vehicle, and any organization fares such as agreements arranged by colleges or universities. With the updated USOA changes for report year 2018, agencies will then be required to report fair revenues in two categories: passenger paid fares and organization paid fares. Passenger paid fares will consist of direct type fares, including full adult fares, senior citizen fares, etc. Organization paid fares will include fares earned from organizations for providing transit service, such as universities, reduced fare reimbursements, and other special contract transit fares. You will then report the total of other directly generated funds in the next section. Some examples of other directly generated funds would be advertising revenues, fundraisers, park and ride revenues, or interest on investments. You must provide a detailed description of the funds reported in this section. Beginning in report year 2018, agencies will now include donations and insurance recoveries in this field. Insurance recoveries should include any insurance payouts, dividends or rebates, and any funds that may be netted out towards future bills. The next section on the form is for PT agreement revenues, or revenues accrued through a purchase transportation agreement. You should only report a value in this field if your purchase transportation agreement meets NTD criteria for a full cost contract. This field is for revenues accrued by a seller of transportation services. This will not include passenger fares generated by this service. You should only report a value in this field if you are the seller or operator of purchase transportation. If this field applies to your agency, you will indicate whether these revenues come from another NTD reporting agency or a non-NTD reporting agency. Next, you will report your non-federal funds. This includes donations, contract revenues, local funds, state funds, and other funds. If you report funds under other, you will be required to provide a detailed description of these funds. The last section of the financial data section is for federal funds. You will first select the applicable federal funding sources on the left side of the screen. Once you do so, the fields will populate on the right side of the page for data entry. Once you've determined the appropriate sources, then you will enter the data for each federal funding source. As a reminder, you will report funds expended on operations and funds expended on capital in separate columns. Please note, if you select an other option, such as other FTA funds, other US DOT funds, or other federal funds, you will be required to provide a description of the original source program. Some examples of these other sources may be FHWA funds or Medicaid funds. Next, you will report service data. You are required to report annual vehicle revenue miles, annual vehicle revenue hours, annual unlinked passenger trips, including sponsored trips for demand response and demand taxi modes, and lastly, annual vehicles operated in maximum service. Vehicle revenue miles and revenue hours should include the miles and hours when your vehicles are in revenue service and also include layover and recovery time. Revenue miles and revenue hours should not include deadhead, operator training, school bus or charter services, or vehicle maintenance testing. Here you will see a table that illustrates what is revenue service, both miles and hours for demand response. For example, when the vehicle departs the dispatching point to pick up a passenger, this is not considered revenue miles or revenue hours. However, on the third example in the table, when a vehicle arrives at a pickup point and waits for the passenger, this would be considered vehicle revenue hours. This next table outlines examples of revenue service for a bus mode. When the bus is traveling on its route during scheduled revenue operation, this would be considered vehicle revenue hours and revenue miles, even if passengers do not board the vehicle. On the fourth row of the table, this provides an example of deadhead. Once the bus arrives at the end of the route and then deadheads back to the storage lot and parks, this would not be considered revenue service. You can reference these tables for both demand response and bus in our policy manual, which is posted on the NTD website. Unlinked passenger trips should represent the total number of boardings on your agency's vehicles while providing public transit. This should be the total boardings for the entire fiscal year that you are reporting on. Now we will cover common validation issues with service data. The first is reporting scheduled hours or available service hours instead of revenue hours. You should report actual vehicle revenue hours and not your scheduled hours for transit. The second common validation issue is reporting vehicle revenue miles based on an average route distance. Agencies should be tracking actual revenue miles and not calculating this total. The third common issue relates to deadhead. Agencies should not include deadhead in annual vehicle revenue miles or annual vehicle revenue hours. Deadhead includes the time in miles when leaving the garage to go to the first point of revenue service, returning to the garage from the last point of revenue service, or any time the driver does not have the duty to carry passengers. If you have questions about what to include in your service totals, please contact your analyst for further guidance.
Related to financial data, another common validation issue we see is related to the total funds expended and the sum of all sources of funds. The values must match on the RR20. When reporting the total funds expended, you should also report the sources of these funds, which should add up to the total funds expended. Here we have an example of the total operating expenses on the left and then the total operating expenses by source on the right. These should add up to our total operating expenses. The last section on the RR20 form is the safety data section. You will report any reportable events that meet one of the following criteria. An event that results in a fatality, an injury, $25,000 or more in damages, a collision that results in the towing of a transit vehicle or another vehicle involved, or an evacuation for life safety reasons. Fatalities should be reported if they occur within 30 days of the event, and injuries are reported when passengers are transported away from the scene for medical attention. Next, we will cover the FFA 10 Federal Funding Allocation Statistics Form. On this form, you will report the vehicle revenue miles, hours, ridership, and operating expenses broken down by each UZA or urbanized area that you serve. You will complete one FFA 10 form for each mode. The UZAs will populate based on your agency's B10 form. If you provide service within one UZA or one non-UZA, you will report all of your service to that area. If you operate in more than one area, you will report all the data statistics for that route to the UZA or non-UZA that is primarily served, or you can allocate the data statistics proportionately to the UZAs and non-UZAs served. This is a summary table of our serve rules for service funded by 5307 funds, 5311 funds, or both. Please refer to our policy manual for further details on serve rules. Here you will see an example of an FFA 10 form with one UZA. There's one column here to enter all of your data. Here's an example of an FFA 10 form with two UZAs. There will be two columns to report your data, one for each UZA. You will see on the left side of the form each data point that you will report: vehicle revenue hours, or VRH, unlinked passenger trips, or UPT, vehicle revenue miles, or VRM, and lastly, operating expenses, or OE. You will first select your UZA reporting method. There are three options: actual data, actual vehicle revenue miles, or other. For actual data, this means your agency tracks 100% of VRH, VRM, UPT, and OE between all of the UZAs that you serve. Actual vehicle revenue miles means that your agency only tracks VRM operated in each UZA. The system will automatically allocate the remaining data points such as VRH, UPT, and OE based on the VRM data that you report to each area. The last option, other, means that your agency uses another methodology to track data between the UZAs. You must provide a description of this method. If you select actual data, you will need to manually enter the values for VRH, UPT, VRM, and OE into both UZA columns. If you select actual vehicle revenue miles, you may only report VRM to each UZA. The other data points will be automatically allocated. You will report the amount of VRM in each UZA column on the form. If you select Other, allocate your data accordingly and then provide a description of your methodology used. Some common validation issues for the FFA 10 form include the data from other forms column not matching the annual total column on the FFA 10 form. This means that the data being pulled in from the RR20 is not matching the annual total that is entered on the FFA 10 form. These values must match. If you update data on the RR20 form, please be sure to revise your FFA 10 form before resubmission so that these columns match on the form. Another common validation issue is changing the UZA reporting methods from year to year. This is typically consistent. If you do change reporting methods, please provide an explanation of this change to your analyst. The last form in the report package is the D10 CEO Certification Form. This form should be completed by your agency CEO. He or she will need to first confirm the accuracy of your NTD report. Next, they will confirm that you reported data in accordance with NTD policy and the Uniform System of Accounts. Lastly, they will review the data collection method for unlinked passenger trips. There are several methods, the most common being 100% count of unlinked passenger trips. The other options are an alternative sampling method, the NTD sampling method, or none of the options listed, which you would provide a description for. Please note that most reduced reporters do not sample for UPT. If you're unsure of what to select for this method, please consult with your analyst for guidance. Once you have determined the method that your agency uses, you will select the choice from the drop-down menu, and the form is now complete.
So now we'll discuss transit asset management reporting under the Expanded Asset Inventory module. Expanded asset inventory reporting is new for 2017. These forms are optional in Report Year 2017, but will be required in Report Year 2018. Agencies must report assets to the NTD when the asset enters revenue service, not when they arrive on transit property. Please refer to the related links below for further guidance. Expanded asset inventory forms will automatically populate in your 2017 report package. This includes the A15, A35, and A90 forms, as well as a few additional fields on the A30. Again, these forms are optional this report year. While there is a basic level of data constraints built into each form, the NTD will not formally validate any data entered in these forms in the report year 2017. We will summarize these forms during this presentation, but if you would like more detailed guidance for TAM reporting, please refer to the resources found on FTA's and NTD's websites. In the Transit Asset Management Facilities Inventory, or A15 form, you will report all maintenance facilities for which you have capital replacement responsibility, as well as all passenger facilities that your agency uses in revenue service, regardless of capital replacement responsibility. Here's an overview of the A15. You will need to complete all required fields, including reporting the facility name, the primary and secondary modes the facility services, whether the facility is shared by any private modes, the facility type, the year it was built or reconstructed as new, the square footage of the facility, number of parking spaces if applicable, the percentage of your agency's capital replacement responsibility, and any applicable notes. You will also need to report a condition assessment for the facility based on FTA's Transit Economic Requirements Model, or TERM scale. This scale ranges from 1 to 5, 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. Report the condition assessment as well as the date your agency completed the assessment. If you would like guidance on how to complete a condition assessment, please refer to the TAM Facility Performance Measure Reporting Guidebook Condition Assessment Calculation document found on NTD's website. On the next page, update the facility's physical address. You will complete the 3 sections we just discussed for all applicable facility types. You will see a few additional fields on the A30 form this year that are related to transit asset management reporting. You are not required to complete these fields on the A30. In each vehicle fleet, you will see useful life benchmark as well as useful life remaining in the vehicle information section. Useful life benchmark will automatically populate a default value when you select the vehicle type on the A30. For example, the vehicle type for this fleet is selected as bus. The standard useful life benchmark for buses, as defined by FTA, is 14 years. Thus, a value of 14 will populate in this field. Agencies have the option to report a value that differs from the default. Useful life remaining will automatically populate once you report the year the fleet was manufactured. In this example, if this fleet was manufactured in 2014, it has been in service for 3 years as of 2017. If the useful life benchmark for buses is 14 years, then the fleet would have 11 useful life years remaining. Please note that useful life remaining is not an editable field, This value is determined based on the year manufactured as well as the useful life benchmark fields. Useful life benchmark is the expected life cycle or the acceptable period of use and service for an asset, as determined by your agency or the default benchmark provided by FTA. Please note that this measure takes into account your unique operating environment, including your geographic location, the frequency of your service, and your climate. Because of this, please also note that useful life benchmark is not the same as useful life for FTA grant programs, which typically defines the minimum age at which equipment can be retired. Also new to the A30 form are the notes and agency fleet ID fields. These are both optional. You may enter notes for fleets as applicable, and you may also enter an internally defined agency fleet ID for easy categorization of your agency's fleet inventory in the system. The Service Vehicle Inventory, or A35 form, is where you report your agency's non-revenue vehicles that support your revenue service. Service vehicles are roadworthy, self-propelled, or major pieces of construction equipment that support revenue operations, maintain revenue vehicles, and perform transit-oriented administrative activities. Report all service vehicles for which your agency has capital responsibility. You will report basic information for each fleet. Similar to the A30 form, group service vehicle fleets by vehicles that share the same characteristics across the board. These must be identical vehicles across all specifications. Report the fleet name and agency fleet ID, the primary and secondary modes the vehicles service, the vehicle type, and number of total vehicles in the fleet. Similar to the A30 form, the useful life benchmark field will populate when you select the vehicle type. Report the year the fleet was manufactured, as well as any applicable notes as needed. On the next page, report your agency's capital responsibility percentage, as well as the total fleet's cumulative estimated cost. On the Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Targets A90 form, report targets for your asset performance in the upcoming fiscal year. This form compares data from the current report year asset forms to the targets entered in the prior report year. You may also submit a narrative report that outlines your performance targets, but the narrative report will not be required until report year 2019. These are the categories that you will see in the A90 form. The sections are broken down into equipment, which represents service vehicles, rolling stock, which represent revenue vehicles, infrastructure, which does not apply to reduced reporters as it pertains to rail, and facilities, which represent your passenger stations and other administrative facilities. In the first section of the A90, report the target percentage of revenue vehicles that will have met or exceeded their useful life benchmark by 2018. The list of vehicle types will populate based on your active modes, and if any vehicle type does not apply to your agency, select the NA checkbox. The rows will become grayed out. In the equipment section, report the percentage of service vehicles that will have met or exceeded their useful life benchmarks in 2018. Again, select NA for vehicle types that your agency does not operate. In the facility section, report the target percentage of facilities that will rate below a 3 on the Transit Economic Requirements Model or term scale in 2018. Select the NA checkbox if the facility type does not apply to your agency. At the bottom of the A90, you may upload your agency's narrative report. This outlines performance targets and your agency's progress towards those targets. This may also include any changes in your transit system conditions or operating environment that may affect your progress towards these targets. You may upload the narrative report in most file formats. Once the report is finalized, navigate to the report package summary page and select related actions. Please note that only the CEO or CEO delegate may submit the original submission, which is the first submission of the report. The NTD contact may submit all subsequent reports during the revision process. Once Related Actions is open, select Submit Annual Report Package. If the report is complete and there are no outstanding issues with the data, you will be able to confirm the report package submission by clicking Continue. Once the report is submitted, you will receive a notification that says Action Completed Successfully. You can confirm that the package was submitted if the package is listed as in review rather than working data on the report package summary page. Your assigned NTD analyst will validate your completed report for any deviations from the reporting requirements, missing data, or data irregularities. This includes whether the data fluctuated significantly from the prior report year, if any forms do not contain all of the necessary information, or if any data elements were reported to the incorrect field. Prior to submitting the report, agencies may take advantage of their resources to reduce the time dedicated to report validation. This includes contacting your analyst prior to submission so that they may review your data in advance. You may also refer to report checklists included in your welcome packet, which contain common validation errors and other items to look out for before submitting. Common reporting issues include nonconformance with NTD definitions, accounting principles, or accrual accounting. This also includes failure to respond to validation issues either raised in the system or by your analyst. All data issues must be addressed and resolved before the report is closed out. When these issues occur and are not resolved, NTD cites them in the closeout letter and looks for correction in the following report year. Please note that FTA may issue a failure to respond if agencies do not address significant validation issues. In these instances, FTA will not accept your report for the database in that particular report year, and your data will not be included for consideration in the formula funding. In order to resolve validation issues, you must provide a detailed explanation for the issue in question. Provide information that gives your analyst a clear picture of how your service operates. Please do not address a validation inquiry by stating that the data is correct, but rather explain how your data changed from the prior year. Explain your changes in service or operating status, even if the details may seem insignificant. If last year's data was reported incorrectly, please explain how it was reported incorrectly so that your analyst understands how to compare it to this year's data. In these instances, please also explain how the issue was resolved this year. It is typical for a report to go through a few revision cycles before being finalized. Your analyst will almost always return your original submission for data revisions or clarifications. Once the report is ready to be sent to FTA for approval, it will either be sent as a clean closeout, which means there were no issues with the report, or it will be a closeout with issues, which means that there were some outstanding issues that could not be resolved prior to the report closeout. The issues are cited in your closeout letter, and your agency will be expected to resolve them by the following report year. Analysts will send agencies a reporting checklist which contain common validation errors and general guidance for completing each report form. The checklist will also include updates on requirements or policy clarifications. The purpose of these checklists is to reduce time dedicated to validation, as agencies can resolve issues prior to submitting the report. If you have a unique or complicated reporting circumstance, please contact your analyst with questions. Looking ahead to the 2017 report year, you can expect a welcome email from your analyst as your due date approaches. This email will include a packet containing helpful tips and tools, as well as the reporter checklist. Your analyst will also provide guidance in completing, submitting, and validating the report until it is closed out. Please do not hesitate to reach out with questions. Here are some helpful links found on the NTD homepage to further assist you with reporting. These include the NTD Policy Manual, NTD Glossary, the Annual Reporting User Guide, and the Uniform System of Accounts Manual. Thank you very much for tuning in. Again, here is the contact information for the NTD Help Desk line. We are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will now open up for questions.
Hi, I'm back on. I copied some of the questions that were in the chat. I don't know if you want me to we can just run through them. The first question was way back at around slide 20 from Martin De Niro. He asked, are you referring now to data from 2017 that is reported in 2018?
Yes, that is correct. The report year 2017 entails the 12-month fiscal year 2017 for your agency.
The second question, also from Martin De Niro. In the past, I believe New Jersey Transit submitted our reports through their reports. Will we need to set completely new profile?
I'm not entirely sure. I think if New Jersey Transit submitted your report on your behalf in prior report years, then you will not need to establish anything new. They will just continue to submit on your behalf again in report year set 2017 as well.
Okay, the next question was from Perry Goodman. What if a contract is a hybrid of unit cost and fixed rate?
So if it's a mix between the two, we just need the rate from which the majority of your service is funded.
Okay, the next question is regarding A10. It says, all vehicles including backup for allocation formula or only active vehicles?
So yep, for the A10, you'll include, that would be total vehicles for each mode.
Next question says, if New Jersey Transit pays cost of vehicles, do we report the capital cost?
No, so in this case, if New Jersey Transit is funding the vehicles, you would not capture the capital costs on your report. But we'd also recommend for more unique situations, talking to your analysts about how to report those capital costs. But if New Jersey Transit's funding those and you're reporting, on your own reports, then those would not be included.
Okay. Next question is, does the new D10 requirement to complete independent auditor statement mean agencies would need to hire independent auditors? Does this have to be completed prior to filling the NTD report for 2018?
Yeah, so agencies will need to have this audit required, completed before the last revision of their 2018 report. So prior to your report being closed out in 2018, this audit does need to be completed. Sorry.
Next question. Our rural service area is about 10% of total area in the county we serve. Are we reporting data for all our service or just the 5311 service area?
So you would end up reporting your total service for your public transit agency. On the FFA 10 form, you can break out the urban and rural data, either by using an allocation based on your vehicle revenue miles, or if you track all of your actual data between the urban and rural areas, you can enter those values manually.
Great. I have two more questions. I think some more are coming in. This is around slide 140-ish. We participated in a joint transit asset management report with our MTA. Does this substitute for these forms in 2018? I guess it would help to know what these forms were, but it was around 140-ish.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's the new transit asset management forms. So that would, participating in a group TAM plan would not substitute those forms for your agency. In that case, your sponsor would fill out only your A90 form and set the targets. They would be responsible for doing that, but your agency would still be responsible for completing the A15, A35 forms.
Okay. Okay, someone just called my attention to an error that oops. Sorry about that. At the top it says managing the environmental review process, and I'm not sure how that got there, but I apologize. That should not be there, everyone. The last question I had grabbed while you were still talking was, who is responsible to fill out the facility condition assessment?
So if your agency has capital responsibility for your facility, you will be required to fill that out on your A15 form. If you are taking part in a group TAM plan, your sponsor would be responsible for setting the targets on the A90 form related to your facilities, but for the condition assessment, you'll fill that out for any facilities that you have capital responsibility for.
Okay, that is all the questions I copied out of the chat box. A new one came in while we were just talking now, Kathy Young. It says, FCA requires our annual audited financials submitted with 9 months at the end of our fiscal year, which is September. We won't have it ready by April for NTD reporting. Thoughts?
So for any delays or anything with not meeting deadlines, we recommend talking to your analyst directly about your concerns and going over that with your analyst and let them know as soon as possible about your timelines for your agency, and they can discuss it with you in further detail.
Okay, that's all the questions that I saw in the chat box. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box now, or you have the Operations Center email and phone number there for additional questions. I'll wait another couple seconds to see if anybody starts typing. If not, then I guess we'll be wrapping it up. Oh, someone is typing. Martin De Niro, for 2017 reporting in 2018, an audit is required. Question. I should have read that with a question tone. An audit is required?
No, the independent auditor statement is not required in report year 2017. It will be required for report year 2018.
Another question is being typed. No pressure, Perry. Type fast. Okay, audit is specifically for NTD data or a general agency audit?
So this independent auditor statement for financial data is to have an auditor review your agency's financial systems to ensure that they are translatable or follow our requirements. There's further detail on this audit in our policy manual, so we'd recommend looking at the specifics of the audit there, but it is specifically related to NTD data.
Thank you. Some more people are typing, but we don't know if they're typing to each other or to us. There could be independent chats going on. Just wait a second. From Michael Pulio. I don't know if I said that right. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. For new vehicles, is the year of manufacture the year the vehicle was delivered and accepted by the agency?
For year of manufacture, that would be the actual year that the vehicle was manufactured in. So you may have vehicles that are, a model year of 2018, but the vehicle was actually manufactured in 2017. So you'll want to look that up for each vehicle and report that on the A30 form.
Okay. Last call for questions. Going once. Going twice. Courtney, Melissa, you have anything else you would like to add before I read my closing remarks?
Nothing from us. Nope.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for participating in our webinar this afternoon. A special thank you to Courtney and Melissa for your informative presentation. As a reminder, everyone, you'll be receiving an invitation to fill out an evaluation for this event. NTI greatly appreciates your feedback. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks.